HighBridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents Love, Death, and Rare Books by Robert Hellenga, narrated by James Patrick Cronin. At least. I want to get up early one more morning, before sunrise, before the birds, even. I want to throw cold water on my face and be at my work table when the sky lightens and smoke begins to rise from the chimneys of the other houses. I want to see the waves break on this rocky beach, not just hear them break as I did all night in my sleep. I want to see again the ships that pass through the strait from every seafaring country in the world, old dirty freighters just barely moving along, and the swift new cargo vessels painted every color under the sun that cut the water as they pass. I want to keep an eye out for them, and for the little boat that plies the water between the ships and the pilot station near the lighthouse. I want to see them take a man off the ship and put another up on board. I want to spend the day watching this happen and reach my own conclusions. I hate to seem greedy. I have so much to be thankful for already. But I want to get up early one more morning, at least, and go to my place with some coffee and wait. Just wait to see what's going to happen. Raymond Carver. Part 1. Chaz Johnson and Son, Limited, Antiquarian Booksellers. 1. The Fur Coat, 1970 through 1971. My grandfather and my father ran an old-fashioned bookshop on 57th Street in Hyde Park. Chaz Johnson and Son, Limited, Antiquarian Booksellers, not far from the University of Chicago. At the time I started working in the shop in the 70s, at age 12, we stocked about 15,000 rare books on the second floor and about 200,000 used books on floors 1, 3, and 4, so you won't be surprised to learn that most of our family stories were about books. Books that Grandpa Chaz brought with him from New York's Book Row when he came to Chicago in 1931. Books from the Bruno estate on the North Shore that gave Grandpa Chaz a leg up during the Depression. Books that Grandpa Chaz and Dad bought at estate sales in the 40s after the war, probably the best time in history to buy rare books. Books bought for $5 and sold for $10, later bought back for $100 and sold at auction, after another 10 or 15 years for $1,000. Books that got away, and books that we couldn't get rid of. But the story that sticks in my imagination is not about a book. It's about a fur coat. Not the raccoon coat in the front of the shop that Saul Bellow used to admire, the coat that Grandpa Chaz had stolen from Harry Gold, the man who engineered the theft of Edgar Allan Poe's Al-Araf from the reserve book room in the New York Public Library. It's about Mama's fur coat. But it's about a book, too. It's shortly after Christmas, 5 months before Mama disappears. The tree is still up. I can smell it in my bedroom, where I sleep with our dog Punch, short for Pulcinella, a stray dog that Mama brought home one day. Mama comes up to say goodnight. She stands in the doorway for a few minutes while we talk, and when she leaves, she says, "Beh, ce l'abbiamo fatta, sani salvi." Well, we made it through, safe and sound. Mama was Italian and always spoke Italian to me when we were alone, and sometimes when we weren't. But I think maybe we haven't made it through safe and sound, because after Grandpa Chaz goes to bed, I hear Mama and Dad, who've been doing some drinking, arguing about something in the kitchen. I wrap my book around my thumb, my favorite Hardy Boys mystery, Hunting for Hidden Gold, and listen at the top of the stairs. I'm trying to figure out what's happening. Mama wanted a fur coat for Christmas, but she'd gotten a rare book instead, a first edition of an Italian translation of Montaigne. "Why would I want to read Montaigne?" she says. "It's in Italian. I thought you'd like it." Dad says more, but I can't make out the words. Then I hear Mama say, "I want to live life, not read about it." After a mysterious silence, Dad says, his voice different, lower, that he'll buy her a fur coat if she'll run around the house outside, stark naked, 3 times. "Deal?" Mama says, laughing. "I'll do it." When Dad starts to protest, to say he's only kidding and that it's too cold to run around outside naked, Mama won't hear of it. She's made up her mind. She wants a fur coat. Ice cubes rattle in the sink, and then Dad comes up the stairs. I get into bed and pretend to be asleep. He comes over to my bed, turns off the light, then stands there for a moment. After he and Punch are back downstairs, I go to my window. From my dormer, I can look out at the houses across the street, at the lighted Christmas decorations in the front yards and the flicker of televisions in the downstairs windows. I don't understand what's going on. I'm embarrassed. But I'm excited, too. No other mother on our block will be running outside naked in 6 inches of snow. I can hear them laughing. Then the kitchen door opens and closes. About 30 seconds later, I see her down below me. She's going counterclockwise, lifting her knees in the deep snow and hugging herself, covering her breasts. She's white as snow, beautiful as an angel, but naked. I try to look away, but I can't. Another 2 minutes and I see her again and watch her disappear, and I know she's running through the narrow space between our house and the Harringtons, which Grandpa Chaz calls a ginnel. Mama appears a third time, a ghostly figure suddenly emerging into the light and disappearing again, and then I hear her pounding on the back door and Punch barking and Dad shouting, "Who is it? What do you want?" before finally opening the door and letting her in. I run downstairs. Dad has wrapped Mama's robe around her and is holding her in his arms. Both of them are laughing, and I start laughing too, and we all drink a glass of Prosecco and something called creme de cassis. 2 days later, we go to McElroy's in Winnetka. It's a sunny winter morning, and we drive along the lake all the way. The sky is blue, the lake blue-green. DuSable Harbor is empty, but the water intake just beyond the breakwater looks like a giant rowboat. I know from the way the salesman greets us at McElroy's that Dad has already spoken to him. The salesman brings a coat out of a climate-controlled vault, and Dad nods. Mama tries it on, but then she asks to see a different coat. She keeps asking to see more coats until she finds what she wants. Mink. I'm too young at the time to disapprove. Black, full length, and sheared. The salesman holds it up, and Mama steps into it and walks up and down, admiring herself in various mirrors. The coat is beautiful, but it isn't a magic coat, and it doesn't keep Mama and Dad from sitting up late, drinking and talking softly. I listen as hard as I can, but I can't make out what they're talking about. I sit at the top of the stairs or at the cold air register till I hear the clatter of ice cubes in the sink, and then I get back into bed. Mama wears the coat all winter. Wears it to the grocery store, wears it when we go with Dad and Grandpa Chaz to Maxwell Street on a Sunday morning, where we eat Polish sausage sandwiches and listen to the Mississippi Blues Band, and Mama gets her fortune told by a gypsy on the corner of Maxwell and Halstead. She wears it when she walks me to school with Punch on his leash. She wears it to my birthday party in April, when all the other mothers are in lightweight linen jackets or windbreakers. But she doesn't take the coat with her when she disappears in May. The morning she disappears is like most mornings. She poaches eggs for us, and then Dad and Grandpa Chaz leave for the shop. I drink a glass of milk with a little coffee in it, and then we walk to school. It's May, but chilly. Mama is in her fur coat, of course, and I'm in my Cubs sweatshirt. Thin clouds hang high in the sky, like hooks or tufts of hair. As we approach the corner of Blackstone and 58th Street, Mama shouts, "Ci stiamo avvicinando all'angolo della cacca numero 1. We're approaching poop corner number 1. And we stop to give Punch a chance to do his business. I'm 12 years old, just finishing my last year at William H. Ray Elementary, so when she puts her arms around me in front of the gate, I'm embarrassed. And that day it's worse because I can see she's crying. "Mi trovo un po' in difficoltà," she says. I'm in trouble. But instead of listening, I run off to join my schoolmates, who are crowding around the front door. When Dad and I come home from the shop that night, she's not there. There's no note. Punch is in the backyard. Grandpa Chaz is taking a nap. Her car isn't in the garage. When she doesn't come home for supper, Dad calls Mrs. Ogilvy, who owns the cabin, the loft, in St. Anne, Michigan, where we vacation every summer, but she isn't there either. Dad doesn't do anything else the first night. She's disappeared before. But when Mama doesn't come home by morning, he calls the police. The police won't declare her missing for a week. She's an adult, and there's no sign of foul play. By then, Dad has telephoned all of her friends and hired a private detective. But 2 weeks after she disappears, a letter comes to the shop. Mama has fallen in love with another man, Dad tells me as we walk home together. She's gone to live with him in Rome. Do you know who it is? I ask. I have a pretty good idea, he says. Mi trovo un po' in difficoltà, she'd said to me the last time she walked me to school. I want to tell Dad, but I think that he's in a little difficulty too, and I don't want to make things worse. A few minutes later, as we turn onto Blackstone, Dad says, She wants to live life, not read about it. Dad doesn't show me the letter, but I have one of my own waiting in the mailbox when we get home. Dad goes to his room and I go to mine. We both need to be alone. She's sorry, she says in her letter. Molto spiccante. She loves me and she hopes I will forgive her. I crumple up the letter till it's the size of a ping-pong ball and throw it into the wastebasket. I get my bike out of the garage and pedal down 57th Street under Lakeshore Drive and out to the point, and sit on the big rocks and throw stones into the lake until I can't see them hit the water anymore. When I get back home, Dad and Grandpa Chaz have already eaten. Dad offers to fry me a hamburger, but I'm not hungry. What the hell is the matter with that woman? Grandpa Chaz says, setting his glass of bourbon on the kitchen table and struggling to get out of his chair. He's a little unsteady. You buy her a goddamn fur coat, he says, and the next thing you know, she leaves us high and dry. In August, Dad and Grandpa Chaz and I go to the loft in St. Anne for 3 weeks, and I take sailing lessons. In September, I start 7th grade at the lab school. Latin, earth science, American history, English, algebra. After school, I go straight to the shop and take Punch for a walk. Amos, our third-floor manager, takes him out at noon, but he spends most of the day in Dad's office. I do my homework at the library table on the 2nd floor. At 6 o'clock or so, Dad and Grandpa Chaz and I walk home with Punch. I always listen for Mama's voice as we enter the empty house, and Punch runs through all 15 rooms, looking for her. On Christmas Eve, Dad and I go to the 4 o'clock service in Rockefeller Chapel, and afterward we skate on the Midway. It feels good to glide with him on the ice as it gets dark, and then sit together in the warming house. Does he expect something to happen? Does he think or hope, as I do, that Mama might come back for Christmas? They've been divorced since Thanksgiving in the United States, but Dad says he and Mama are probably still married in Italy, because Italy won't recognize an American divorce. I had swallowed my anger and answered Mama's letter, which I'd retrieved from the wastebasket, begging her to come home. Dad and I don't talk about the possibility. We're afraid to jinx it. I help make dinner that night while Grandpa Chaz sits at the kitchen table drinking bourbon. We boil some small potatoes and make a salad. I set the table in the dining room while Dad sautés 3 small steaks. Dad opens a bottle of red wine and we sit down to eat. We don't talk much. I think we're all waiting for something to happen. Afterward, we sit in the living room and wait some more. The tree looks nice, but it doesn't have Mama's touches. Dad sits in his chair with his eyes closed, a book on his lap, while I wrap a couple of presents at the glass coffee table and fill out the tags. I haven't wrapped any presents for Mama, but I have a couple of things in reserve just in case. Some earrings and a small leather wallet. I assume Dad does too. High and dry, Grandpa Chaz said. I'm going up to bed. Dad opens his eyes and picks up his book again. We read in front of the fire for another half hour, and then Dad unplugs the tree and says goodnight. I'm halfway through a boy's version of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, which I've read before. The Christmas festivities are over, and Gawain is about to set out on his quest to confront the mysterious Green Knight. I try to imagine him in his gleaming, golden bright armor. but I get lost in my fantasy and keep picturing him in Mama's fur coat. I close the book, and then my eyes. But I don't fall asleep. I'm waiting, as if for Santa Claus, or Babbo Natale, as Mama called him, and watching the shadows from the last embers move along the ceiling. After a while, I go upstairs. I take Mama's coat out of her closet, still in its protective garment bag, and drag it down the stairs. I plug in the tree and unzip the bag and pull out the coat and slip it on. It's incredibly warm. I turn up the collar. There's a blue plastic poop sack in one of the pockets. I turn on a light to keep myself awake, but then I lie down on the couch and after a while I fall asleep. I'm still there, wrapped up in Mama's coat when Dad and Grandpa Chaz come downstairs in the morning. Dad shakes me and says, "Merry Christmas." "How much did you pay for that goddamn coat?" Grandpa Chaz asks. "And she didn't even take it with her." "The best money I ever spent," Dad said. "I don't want to hear any more about it." He gets that look he sometimes gets and leaves the room. At 10 o'clock, Dad and I take Punch for a walk. Along the way, Dad points out the site of the old Steinway drug shop on 57th and Kenwood. The owner, he tells me, once asked 3 men to leave because they came in every morning and never ordered anything except coffee, and later the busboy told him he just kicked out 3 Nobel Prize winners. Back home, Dad puts a pre-cooked turkey from the co-op in the oven to warm up, and together we peel the potatoes and put them on to boil. We open a can of cranberry relish and put it in a cranberry glass bowl on the dining room table. I set the table, and Dad opens a bottle of wine. We take the turkey out of the oven and put in an apple pie, also from the co-op. There are none of Mama's fried artichokes. There's no pasta. From my seat, I can see Mama's fur coat, folded over the back of the couch. 2. First Love, 1974. After Mama went away, I started walking to the shop with Dad and Grandpa Chaz early in the morning. Punch would go with us, and I'd shout out, "Ci stiamo avvicinando all'angolo della cacca numero 1, and then, depending, numero 2. I'd sit in Dad's office till it was time to walk to school, reading a book or adding up columns of figures on the old Victor adding machine, one that had been retired, with 2 black columns for the cents, 3 white columns for the tens, and 3 more black columns for the hundreds. As I waited for the tap, tap, tap of Miss Sullivan's flats on the stairs and the smell of her perfume. She and her sister Estelle, who worked the register at the counter by the front door, wore different perfumes. Equally expensive and equally offensive. Dad kept them both supplied at Christmas and birthdays. They were always carefully made up, eyes dark, greenish-blue, with mascara, their hair already thinning and turning pale, held in place by tortoiseshell combs. Afternoons, Punch and I worked the first floor, selling children's books to young readers my own age, and to their mothers. In those days, the first floor was like a conveyor belt. On Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, people could bring their used books to the shop, and Archie Blair, who came from Belfast and spoke with a heavy Ulster accent, would go through them. History and philosophy, religion, literature, science, travel, cookbooks, children's books, and quote them a price. If the price was acceptable, he'd put them on a cart, and a day or so after they'd been processed, they'd emerge at the front of the shop, where they would wait for buyers for a few days before being shelved. At 6 o'clock, we'd walk home. I still listened for Mama's voice as we entered the empty house, and Punch continued to run through all 15 rooms, looking for her. By the time I was 14, young adult literature was beginning to emerge as a distinct genre, and I was beginning to feel the pangs of adolescence. Used copies of The Catcher in the Rye, and Are You There, God, It's Me, Margaret, and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory started showing up in the shop, and I was happy to recommend them. But by the time I turned 15, I was looking for something more, which I seemed to find in poetry. Tennyson's In Memoriam, for example, and in long walks with Alex, with whom I was doing independent reading in Latin, and in long bike rides. We walked the boundaries of Hyde Park, lake to Cottage Grove. We biked along the lake, sometimes all the way up to Loyola. Alex's mother was a warm, loving woman, and we sometimes did our homework together in her kitchen, but more often we worked at the shop, at the library table on the third floor, between psychology and philosophy. We read everything we could find about sex for our library project in science, everything from Krafft-Ebing's Psychopathia Sexualis in a translation of the 7th enlarged and revised German edition, 1894, by Charles Gilbert Chaddock, on a shelf next to the library table, to Nancy Friday's My Secret Garden, Women's Sexual Fantasies. And our joint project on Psychopathia Sexualis, which contains a total of 238 case histories of human sexual behavior, created a sensation at the lab school, especially the account of the man who drank the urine of a 9-year-old boy after performing fellatio on him. Parents complained to the director, who complained to our parents, and there was a fuss about First Amendment rights and freedom of speech. Krafft-Ebing gave us a lot to wonder about, and the report made us heroes of a sort. Our classmates started coming into the shop to have a look, some of the girls too, including Alice Archer, the only girl I'd ever kissed, though I'd often undressed her in my imagination. We tried not to draw attention to our gatherings at the long table, but either Dad got wind of them or else he simply stumbled upon us by accident. It was an interesting moment. We froze, but Dad didn't scold us. Instead of scolding, he talked about the publication history of the book. We had 4 different editions in the shop, including the first German edition, in modern firsts in the rare book room. Later editions, he explained, were quite different from the first, and some of the bindings were very interesting, but by this time, the report on Krafft-Ebing was behind us and we had moved on to other things. Our French teacher, for example, Mademoiselle Arnaud. What would it be like to put your hand up Mademoiselle Arnaud's skirt? Alex wondered. How about dropping your pencil on the floor so you could at least look up her skirt? But she sits at her desk in the front, I objected. So you'd have to drop your pencil at the front of the classroom, and she'd have to come around the desk. Pretty tame after Krafft-Ebing. Most things, including Playboy, seemed pretty tame after Krafft-Ebing. There was still plenty to wonder about, of course, especially a woman who came to the shop once a week, around closing time on Thursdays. Shirley. Alex thought she might be a Playboy bunny, or at least she could have been. She was small and curvy and had long blonde hair, like a movie star. Alex said she probably glowed in the dark. In summer, she wore a wide straw hat, and in winter a pillbox fur hat like the hat Geraldine Chaplin wears in Dr. Zhivago. Dad said it was fox fur. I tried to connect her visits with some of the words we'd learned in Krafft-Ebing. Coitus, fellatio, cunnilingus, sadism, masochism, fetishism, imitatio coitus inter femora viri, frautism. Not words, really, but counters that I understood only dimly. Dad usually sent me home with Grandpa Chaz, but I started pretending to be busy with my Latin homework. We were reading Ovid. Alex and I were working on a translation of Amores 3:14, which was not actually on the reading list, but which, like Krafft-Ebing, stimulated our imaginations. Spondaque lasciva mobilitate tremat. Let the bed shake with your trembling motion, or shake the bed with your lascivious movements. She's got great legs, Alex said. Knockers, too. Stick right up there. Do you think he's putting it to her? No way, I said. In the shop? That'd be like doing it in church. It happens. Jerry Holsinger told me that Father Donovan likes to touch the altar boys. He's got some magazines he says will keep you going all night, but we'd have to rent them. I was curious, but not ready to jump. Sometimes I'd stay at the shop and walk down 57th Street to Blackstone with Dad and Shirley, who took the IC from the 57th Street station. One night, Dad came to get me earlier than usual. I had my books spread out on the library table. Dad was alone. I'd been translating a difficult passage in the Metamorphoses about Actaeon, and Dad startled me, as Actaeon must have startled Diana. I looked up. The sight of him was reassuring. Dative of passion, I said, and he laughed. The dative of passion had been invented by Alex. I started to pack up my books, but he told me to wait. "Shirley's coming to the shop," he said. "Later. There's a present for her on my desk in the office." He handed me a ring of keys. "Just lock up, and be sure to reset the alarm." Shirley? By herself? I said okay and turned back to Ovid, to the Latin textbook and the lobe I was using as a crib, but the words on the page were out of focus. The shop was empty, quiet. My heart was ramping up, the way it did before an exam in pre-calculus or when doing a difficult problem at the board in front of the class. Shirley arrived just before we locked up at 8. I heard Oscar speaking to her, and then I heard the elevator trundling up to the second floor, where I was working at a table between the elevator and banned books. I wasn't sure what was happening, and held my breath till she appeared. Immediately, she pulled out a chair and sat down next to me. She was a beautiful woman. I tried, unsuccessfully, to slow my breathing. She looked at all the books spread on the table. "You take up a lot of space?" she said, and asked what I was reading. I tried to explain. Pre-calculus, Latin, history. "Would you like to come to your dad's office with me?" "Do you want me to help you find something?" "He said it would be on his desk." I started to say that I needed to get home, but she smiled and put her hand on my arm. "You don't need to be afraid." She nodded her head toward the office in the back. Why would I be afraid? I asked myself. Maybe, I answered, because I was thinking of the horror stories in Krafft Ebing. "Well," she said, "maybe it's good to be a little bit afraid." I started to tell her about Actaeon. He saw the goddess Diana naked and she turned him into a stag. He didn't mean to see her, it just happened, out in the woods. He was hunting, and then she turns him into a stag and sets his dogs on him, and they tear him apart. She gently tugged on my arm. As I followed her through the open stacks, my body seemed to be pulling me back. My hands were sweating, and my feet seemed to be sinking into the floor at each step. Shirley turned. "Better to walk behind a lion than behind a woman," she laughed. "I promise I won't turn you into a stag," she said. "Cross my heart." I often thought of this moment in later life, walking behind a woman in the co-op or on 57th Street or on Michigan Avenue. Better to walk behind a lion than behind a woman. The key to Dad's office on the second floor, next to the rare book room, was on the key ring he'd given me earlier. I had trouble opening the door. It was a nice room, but nothing fancy. Books everywhere, of course. Wherever Dad sat down, you'd be sure to find a pile of books. She took her clothes off. I'd never seen a naked woman before, except in Playboy, or the time Mama ran around the house starkers. I'd never seen the hair between a woman's legs. She unbuttoned my shirt, and I didn't stop her. She leaned over and touched my chest with the tip of her tongue, and I was no longer afraid. Dad didn't have a regular bed in his study, but there was a comfortable sofa. I didn't understand that I was supposed to come in her mouth. I was super aroused, of course, but I was young and had a lot of staying power and used the occasional thought of Krafft Ebing to put a brake on things. After a while, she asked me if I'd like her to use her hand, and then I understood. I thought I didn't have a word for it, but I did. Fellatio. We lay on our backs next to each other in silence. The couch was barely wide enough for the two of us. "I told your dad he should get a real bed in here." "What would people think?" "They'd think he likes to entertain pretty women up here." I'd crossed a line, but really it was more like straddling a line. I wasn't sure how to ask for what I wanted. What I wanted was the real thing, the thing itself. Coitus, not fellatio. "Is that all?" I asked. She laughed. "No," she said. "There's more." "You do these things with my father?" "Yes. And did he tell you not to give me all your money?" "No," I said. "He didn't tell me that. I don't have any money anyway. Maybe $3? She laughed again. She lay down and opened her legs, though not too wide, because the couch was narrow, and pulled up her knees. I was ready. What I experienced was not...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?